والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم صل وبارك وسلم عليه في الأولين وفي الآخرين وفي الملء الأعلى يا رب العالمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask him to send, we teach him to send his peace and security upon the beloved of Allah, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, upon his companions, his family, his community, and those who follow him until the end of time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, in Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Fatiha is the site map for a GPS for how we should live our lives. Whoever wants to go to Jannah, take Surah Al-Fatiha as the GPS to Jannah. The acknowledgement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the acknowledgement of the hereafter, the acknowledgement of worship being only for Allah, and then the last component of Surah Al-Fatiha is good character, avoiding the character of Maghdubi alayhim and the character of Al-Dhalin, and being from Ahli Sirat Mustaqim. And in that surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Maliki yawmiddin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that a day will come when there is no authority. يَوْمَ لَا تَمْلِكُ نَفْسٌ لِنَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَالْأَمْرُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلَّهِ. That there will come a day where authority rests solely in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he said the importance of the hereafter is such that you will not be able to find a page of the Quran except the hereafter is mentioned. So, Surah Al-Fatiha, first page of the Quran, Maliki yawmiddin. The next page, وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. Allah says those who have certainty in the hereafter. The next page. The third page, سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. So every page, you find the hereafter mentioned. The next page, وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about hellfire. The next page, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ paradise. What I just said in Arabic because of time is that in every page of the Quran you'll find a verse. Usually you'll find a verse that talks about the hereafter. And that's to illustrate its importance, its centrality. Now, the Muslim and the believer loves the hereafter because the hereafter is the opportunity to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, at the time of his death, the angel of death came to him and said, I have been sent by your friend, Khaliluk, your friend, to take your soul. And Sayyidina Ibrahim said, but what type of friend would take the soul of his friend? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed to him, and what type of friend would hate to meet his friend? And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Man yuhibbu liqa Allah. Whoever loves to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love to meet him. And one of the ways to create a balance in our life is to think about the hereafter. Imam al-Maqdisi, the great scholar, said that there are two ways you learn, with ilm I'tibar means to think about the creation around you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ. We send the Quran as a healing, ibra. I'tibar, thinking about the creation around us and learning lessons from our environment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Those who think, invested their thinking in the heavens and the earth and its their creation, and they say, our Lord, you have not created this in vain. Save us from the hellfire. Now, in the famous hadith of Jibreel, the Prophet ﷺ illustrated for us that belief in the hereafter is one of our 6 pillars of faith. وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, he said ﷺ, وَتُؤْمِنُ بِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. But there are some dangers also in our relationship to the hereafter, that sometimes we fail to understand the fruit of the hereafter and how the hereafter should shape a certain type of personality. Because oftentimes, when we read the Quran, or perhaps study hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or listen to the ulama, we may find ourselves like Musa in front of Khadr. And Khadr is saying to him, لَمْ تُحِتْ بِهِ خُبَرًا وَكَيْفَ تُصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِتْ بِهِ خُبَرًا. He said to him, how is it you can be patient with something that you don't understand? Most of the great ulama were rejected and kicked out by their people historically. The great scholars that we love, the people that they were with had very little respect for them. SubhanAllah, like Al-Bukhari. It's unbelievable. Qari Abdul Wahab al-Maliki, he was from Iraq. He's one of the greatest scholars in the 3rd century. But the people failed to help him. The leadership turned against him. And when he left Iraq, he said, لَقَدْ كُنْتُ فِي الْعِرَاقِ كَالْمُصْحَفِ فِي بَيْتِ زَنَبِيلٍ. He said, I was in Iraq, and this is the 2nd century, like a Quran in the house of an apostate. So oftentimes when we sit and we hear things that we don't know or we don't understand, we come across the ideas about the akhirah, we assume that we know. But our approach with knowledge and leadership should be مَا لَمْ تُحِتْ بِهِ خُبَرًا. Maybe you don't know. And in Arabic, it's very difficult to translate what Khadr said to Musa. لَمْ تُحِتْ. Tuhit means to encompass. You can't encompass this information. You don't have the capacity to understand. And how many prophets said, لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ قَوْلًا. How many prophets said, woe to my people. They don't understand what I'm trying to say to them. So we talk about the hereafter. I want to talk about 2 points that we tend to fail in understanding the role of the hereafter in our aqeedah. The first is that people will use the hereafter as an excuse to ignore the dunya. People will use the hereafter as an excuse to be lazy here. And when you ask them, then why are you acting like that? Or why do you act this way? Why, inshallah, in the hereafter, inshallah, we'll find khairat. In the end, inshallah, it will be good for me. I have husnul dhan billah. What's wrong with you? Husnul dhan is mu'akad iman. But there's tamanni and there's husnul dhan. But actually, one of our scholars said something beautiful. The hereafter is called al-ghaybiyat. 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 The things you don't see. Or sam'iyat. The things you have to hear from the prophets about. So I used to say to us, tamarat al-ghaybiyat fil mushahadat. He used to say to us that the fruit of the unseen is found in the seen world. It's the best way I can translate it. That the fruit of what you don't see is found in what you see. Meaning that someone who lives for the hereafter is going to be someone of benefit to the people around them. They're not going to neglect their responsibility in this life. Once Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he came into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ during his Khalifa, and he found 2 men. There were 3 boys actually, 3 young men, and they were dressed in kind of, shoddy clothes, and they were making dhikr. They were remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Sayyidina Umar said to them, what do lives for now. It's a reciprocal process. And that's what I find in the Quran. People who live for the hereafter are the biggest benefit to their society. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said very beautifully, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We feed you for Allah. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We don't want a reward or thanks for it. إِنَّا نَخَافُ مِن رَبِّنَا يَوْمًا عَبُوسًا. We fear the day that we will meet our Lord. So their feeding of others, their addressing needs of people around them, is rooted in what? In the belief in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes the Ansar in Medina, Ahl Medina, Ahl Barakah, الطيبة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَيُثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. That they will prefer others to themselves. And it's rooted in their belief in the hereafter. So the first is that we should not use the hereafter as an alibi to be neglectful here. But the hereafter should be the gasoline that motivates us to be beneficial and utilizing every possible resource that we have around us. The second is that people will often use the hereafter as a means to be harsh to others. So they will invoke, especially sometimes religious people, من مكيد الشيطان, والشيطان will trick them, أنت من أهل الدين, أنت من أهل الحق, ما شاء الله, you're from the people of taqwa, you're from the people of this, عقيدتك صحيحة, ما شاء الله, أقامك الله تعالى في موقف عظيم, and the person begins to think that, wow, I'm something, and then they become the qadi of the masjid. So when they come into the masjid, anyone they see doing something they think is wrong, they became the judge, the jury, and the hangman, all in one. And this usually is the fruit of people who study على يد الشيخ Google. أو ممكن يتلمذ على يد الشيخ الاسترانة. أو يتعلم على يد الشيخ ياهو ابن Google ابن Hotmail. That's the person who usually studies in Paltalk. They go to lessons that talk about how bad all the Imams are. You know, tasweedul hayat. The world is over. They study with Sheikh Morbid. And they come out as morbid people. Ilmu qalil shay'un khatir. You know, the Arabs say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing. Because when you study with technology, you take out the human element. My Sheikh would cry in front of me when I memorized Quran. I remember I was reading Surah Suhaib to him, and he started crying. Like, you don't see that when you study with someone like Google. You don't see a human experience. You don't feel that organic reality. So the person becomes qadi al-qudat, mashallah. And they will invoke the hereafter as a means to treat other people wrong. I remember once I was in Masjid al-Azhar al-Sharif. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free Egypt from this dhulumat, this fara'im. And I remember I was there, and it's a shame that the United Nations would even allow Sisi to speak as the president of a country that he stole. But I remember I was there, and there was a young Muslim, and he was there, he was from another country, and we were talking, and then one scholar, you know, a great scholar actually, walked in the mosque, a very old man, muhaddith. And he said to me, do you know him? I said, yeah, he's my Sheikh Hadith. He said, this guy is kafir. This guy is not Muslim. So I said, really? Just like that? Just stamping kafir stamps on people right and left? I said, well, how can you say that? He memorized more than 40,000 hadith on the Prophet with as-samin back to Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How can you say he's kafir? He said to me, you know, because he did this and this and this. So I said, the three things that you mentioned now, first of all, are from the bab of fiqh, not from the bab of aqidah. They're from the issues of the actions, not creed. And there's no takfir of these issues, first of all. Secondly, I said, the issues that you mentioned, Imam Ahmad, on one of those issues, he had 18 opinions. And one of his opinions agreed with this guy. Are you saying that Imam Ahmad is a kafir? Then he said to me, well, you know, we have to live for the hereafter. We cannot, you know, give ourselves to these scholars, these modern ulama. So he uses the hereafter as an alibi to slander and treat people wrong. But the Prophet ﷺ taught us the opposite. the more ethics I'll have, the more uprightness I'll have, the more justice I'll have. The Prophet ﷺ said, Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. Whoever believes in Allah at the last day, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Let them speak well or remain silent. So he ties an Imam al-Hafiz, al-A'lam, Ibn Rajab al-Asqalani, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. He said, look how the Prophet ﷺ ties character and ethics to the hereafter. And that's why I said also sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, أَقْرَبُكُمْ إِلَيَّ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. The closest of you to me in the hereafter are the best in character. So the hereafter is not an alibi to treat other people wrong. And that's why the Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, mentioned the story of a man, the time of Bani Israel, who his roommate didn't pray. And that man, he used to say to his roommate, pray, 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 pray. His roommate, he was lazy, has issues. Sometimes he prays, sometimes he doesn't pray. Then finally he said to him, Allah will not forgive you. The Prophet said they will be resurrected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The guy who didn't pray, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask him, why did you pray? And he would say, Wallahi, I was lazy. And the hadith was lazy. I tried my best, made mistakes. He will admit his mistakes in front of Allah, i'tiraf. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. The other person who said Allah will never forgive you, who did all of these good deeds, all of the piety, in Sahih al-Bukhari, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to him, first question, why did you tell someone I won't forgive them? Why did you say that I will not forgive other people? Because as the ulama said, a mistake in amal is not like a mistake in aqidah. And as a mistake in action, making some errors in action, is not the same as a creedal mistake. And to tell anyone that Allah will never forgive them is to cross the boundaries with the Sultan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يحبب إلينا لقاءه كما نسأله أن يحبب إلينا لقاء سيد الأولين والآخرين صلى الله عليه وسلم. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الحمد لله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. As we mentioned, the statement of Imam al-Maqdisi, that we learn through two ways. We learn through study, al-ibrah, and we learn through i'tibar, by studying the things around us. I'm going to say something, maybe people in Boston are happy, but at the same time maybe they're mad. And that was yesterday, Derek Jeter, it was his last game. And the discussion was very interesting for our community because it's a discussion about leadership and talent. And as I was watching the game last night, the discussion was about his legacy, like what he leaves in any community he goes to. And they talked about what made him what he was interesting. And I thought it applies to the Muslim community in our relationship with each other. Number one was trust. He stayed with this organization for almost 20 years. There was a sense of trust between the leadership and the talent that the leadership has around it. The aman. And the Prophet ﷺ in numerous hadith, he said for people to flourish and for communities to flourish, there has to be trust. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, even the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have is called an aman. Inna aradna al-amanata ala as-samawati wal-ardi wal-jibal. So trust. The Prophet is an amin before he's nabi. Leadership is rooted in trust. The second is talent. Throughout his tenure with the team that we don't like, he was able to be blessed, if you will, from a sports perspective, with talent. It wasn't a one-man show. There were people around him who made him what he is. And institutions and communities have to realize that there has to be a constant influence of fresh faces and fresh talent in the Muslim community. If you look at the Jewish community, how many young Jews they send to Israel every year, and they come back contributing to their community.
We don't really have programs that bring, and we're in Boston, this is the intellectual hub of America. We have thousands, there's almost 5,000 Turkish students in Northeastern alone, subhanAllah. All of this incredible talent to be brought in and to teach us how to build an institution for the future and to grow and to think differently, and to see outside the box. The masjid as it has existed in America for the last 30 years is no longer cutting it. Young people are leaving masajid. When you go to prayers, you find the average age of people praying in the masjid is over 55. And that's scary for the long-term physical health of an institution when you don't have young donors, young people invested in their hearts and their minds and their souls. 2,000 converts in Boston, but only 2 or 3 come on a regular basis. We should be worried and think about utilizing the talents that we have in our community, not simply, hoping for the best. The third important quality that they noted in his tenure as this incredible sports icon was that he was able to function outside of his small group of professional people. He had endeared himself to the community of New York City. So leadership has to think about how to reach deeper into communities. When I was in college and I did my degree in education, I had to take 2 classes on how to foster relationships with the community. Not the kids and the parents, the community itself, because schools can't function on their own. We're seeing that now with the crisis in the Boston public school system. So if we look at our communities, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. I know it's a little bit, I threw you a curveball, no pun intended, but there are a lot of lessons to be learned, and I believe this maybe in ESPN, about certain things that we would say as Muslims, blessed with to reach success. Trust. Number 2 was the fact that he was surrounded by fresh faces and people who understood his vision and his mission and supported him. Thirdly was that he was able to reach deeper into the community and cross ethnic lines and racial lines. And the last is communication. He was known to have the worst owner in the sense of personality in Major League Baseball, but still somehow he was able to communicate with him effectively and make things happen. Those are the remedies for our Muslim community that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, to be trustworthy people, to appreciate calm talent around us, ﷺ. When Amr ibn As converts, 2 weeks later he's head of an army because he's good at it, ﷺ. Number 3 is the community relationship. Prophet ﷺ, Imam Zuhri used to go to Medina and meet the people, right? To understand how to make fatwa. And the 4th is this sense of communication. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Shura baynahum, people who have consultation amongst themselves. It's not a one-way road. People understand they can't control everything. They share in the broader discussion of what it means to be in a community. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise us, inshallah, and bless us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from nifaq. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قلوبنا من النفاق وألسنتنا من الكذب. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless one of our dear sisters. She has been struck with cancer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure her. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remedy her illness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a means for her forgiveness in the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our community. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our parents who have passed away and our loved ones, our spouses and our children. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the marriages in our family. We ask Allah to bless the single parents in our community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aid you as you struggle to raise your children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise them as He raised our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu